My name is Jeff Anderson, and I am one of the attorneys for this very courageous survivor standing to my left with his wife of over 41 years. This is Ron Vasek and Patty Vasek, and I am honored to be standing with them today. And the reason we are here and delivering the message that we think needs to be is because some months ago, Ron Vasek had the courage to stand up for himself and other kids and expose the Diocese of Crookston, the current bishop, for some very dangerous practices, and he sued the diocese and the bishop in Crookston for coercion, for negligence, and for nuisance. The coercion case was settled, and Ron got the letter that he needed to get from the bishop in order for that matter to be. But the negligence and the nuisance case continued, and the diocese and the bishop attempted to throw the case out, both on the statute of limitations and that there wasn't a basis for the claim. Late Friday, the presiding judge, Judge Marvin, ruled against the diocese and ruled against the bishop. And in this decision, wrote an order that says that Ron Vasek's case moves forward, both in the negligence and on the nuisance. And he has ruled that now Mr. Vasek and this case can enable him and us to require this diocese and the Diocese of Crookston and the bishop to finally begin to come clean. Come clean in having to reveal all the files of all the offenders and all those who have been accused of childhood sexual abuse who have worn collars in the Diocese of Crookston and have worked there since 1950. This is a major step in child protection in the Diocese of Crookston and northern Minnesota, and more importantly, for the safety of kids who remain at peril by the dangerous practices of secrecy. And a testament to Ron Vasek and his wife and his family's courage for standing up for the truth and requiring this diocese to account. A couple of the facts that are important here is Ron was abused as a teenager and molested as a teenager by Monsignor Grundhaus, a very prominent official in the diocese in 1971. He, as most kids, had to keep that secret, and he did. And when he began to, as a devout Catholic, pursue a diaconate in the Diocese of Crookston to become a deacon, he disclosed to some priests that he had been abused. And one of those priests reported that to the bishop, Bishop Hoeppner. That's Grundhaus. And Bishop Hoeppner then asked Ron about that, and Ron asked if that would hurt his progress in becoming a deacon in the diocese. At that time, the bishop expressed that if he keeps it secret, it won't be a problem. Ron complied. In 2015, the bishop, Bishop Hoeppner, called Ron to his office. Actually, to his residence, private residence. And because this was an exploding issue at that time, the bishop challenged Ron about whether he was going to make this known. And at that time, required Ron to keep it a secret and to not disclose that he had been abused by this prominent priest was still a prominent priest and former official in the diocese. At that time, the bishop presented a letter to him that the bishop had prepared with the help of one of his assistants, Fultz, and required Ron to sign a letter. And that letter that he required Ron to sign under the threat of his diaconate and under the threat of his son's priesthood, who's a priest of the diocese, required Ron to sign this letter that says, I, Ron Vasek, regarding the trip I was on at 16 years old, in which a priest of the Diocese of Crookston was also participating, clearly and freely state that I have no desire, nor do I make any accusation of sexual impropriety by the priest towards me. And it required Ron to sign that, prepared by him on October 21st, 2015. In other words, the bishop coerced Ron under the threat of his son's vocation as a priest and Ron's progress as a deacon and a Catholic in the diocese. And it's on that basis that the judges now ruled that the case can move ahead and that it's not time barred because of the duress and the coercion here, as evidenced by that letter and that promise, and the requirement that Ron lie. And also, we now stand poised to require this diocese and the Diocese of Crookston and this bishop to finally come clean, to abide by the promise of transparency that he has already made, but now will be required by the court, and the courage and the efforts of Ron Vasek and his family. And to you, Ron Vasek, and Patty and your family and your son, and all of those that stand with you, we're grateful for this chance to bring this information forward and have what should have been done now begun to be done in a way it never has. And so to that, first, Ron, I'd like you to address how you feel about this and why you took this action.
Well, I'm very pleased that the judge ruled the way he did on this case. One of the main reasons is that with this case now, Jeff Anderson's office will be able to go in and find the truth that they were ordered to reveal in 2015. And also just to reveal the truth of what's happening in our diocese. For years and years, there's been a secrecy about sex abuse within our diocese. And after the first press conference, I have come to realize through all the emails and the letters and the phone calls and the people stopping me on the street, people that I don't even know, how much sexual abuse is prevalent in our society as a whole, which is appalling. But it's even more appalling when it happens within our diocese. The diocesan leaders should be the ones setting the bar high for the protection of children, not skirting around statutes and legal stuff to protect their children. The diocese and the bishop and those that are in charge of the diocese should be very transparent in letting people know what the problems are and weeding out the problems and taking the appropriate action to protect the children that they are sworn by God to protect. And I find this very discouraging at this moment in time, the secrecy and the obstruction that happens when somebody brings a suit. I've talked to a number of survivors, and the thing that tears them up the most is the way they get treated. They get re-abused all over again by the people that are supposed to be protecting us, just by their actions and how they fight things civilly. It shouldn't take a judge to make the guys in our diocese do what's right. They're sworn when they ordained to be servants of God. And it's not happening. So I am just very pleased that God gave the judge the courage and the wisdom to allow this case to move forward so that we can get to the truth. Because the truth is what we all need for freedom. And without the courts, the truth would never be revealed. And I would just hope that the diocese and the bishop and those in charge would open the books. Shouldn't need court orders to go in and see what's going on, to protect the children and to protect the people in our diocese. It shouldn't have to be the courts that do it. It should be our men that are in charge that do this because of honor and because of the dignity of the office that they hold. So I'm very pleased with this decision, and I just hope that the truth will be told. That's my whole thing, is the truth.
Ron, you're now 62 years old?
Correct.
You're a lifelong Catholic?
Yes.
And you had been pursuing the vocation of becoming a deacon in this diocese.
Yes.
At the time that you brought this suit and actually were called into the bishop's office, is that right?
Correct.
You and your wife and your family are members and had been members at Holy Trinity in Tabor?
Correct.
Where you live?
Right, all my life.
All your life. And you've been married to that lovely woman to your left for 41 years?
Yes, 42.
42 years, all
42.
right. And Patty, you've shared this journey and heard Ron's exhortation to the bishop to come clean, to be transparent. Ron's exhortation to the bishop to abide by his promise, to tell the truth. At the same time, you know that he and this diocese are hiding the names of the offenders who have been accused of sexual abuse. You know that he and this diocese, this bishop, have been keeping the files of those offenders secret and in their archives and not available to us or anybody else to know the truth. As a devout Catholic who has been raised in this diocese as a person of faith, what say you about this? And what do you think people need to know about why you stand here with your courageous husband and take this effort today and in the last months?
So our bishop has publicly stated that he is going to be transparent, and he's promised the people that he'll be transparent, keep the people informed of what's going on, and that hasn't been the case, doesn't seem to be the case so far. So we're hoping that he will keep his promise to the people in his public statement of being transparent and of revealing what he needs to reveal and to cooperate as he has publicly stated that he will cooperate. And that's what our hope, that he will do that.
Well, we thank you, Patty, for standing with Ron and your family and your son, who is a priest, who, of course, is some great peril under the threat of the bishop when he requires you to sign a recantation of the molestation. Grundhouse is now on administrative leave, but we know there are other names of other offenders who have never been made known, as you've made his name known. And so your goal today in this case, as it has been from the past to the present, is to have the truth revealed, as painful as it is.
Wherever the truth leads, that's where it should lead. We can't hide behind statutes. We can't hide behind civil law. I mean, the truth is what it is. And the consequences of the truth are what they will be. If that means that things happen in the diocese that some people don't like, that's the way it's going to be. But the truth needs to be revealed at all costs, because the safety of our children and those that are members of our diocese need to be protected.
And the consequences of this order being now issued by this court that can require and does require the Diocese of Crookston and the bishop to come clean with the truth embedded in those files and the names of those known offenders who have committed or been accused of childhood sexual abuse, is that children will be safer, is that the diocese can be better. It also needs to be noted that there are claims against other dioceses, and let's put up the map of Minnesota. There are two other dioceses besides the Diocese of Crookston right here, and that is the Diocese of Crookston right here, which is the subject of this claim, but there are also claims in the Diocese of Duluth and the Diocese of St. Cloud, both in red there. And we put them in red because all three dioceses have yet to make a public disclosure, a full accounting of the files of the accused offenders in Crookston, in Duluth, and in St. Cloud. It's also noteworthy that in green there are 4 dioceses, all of whom have been sued similarly for nuisance and negligence, who have now, under court compulsion, been required to come cleaner and turn over those files, and that is the Archdiocese of St. Paul, Minneapolis, the Diocese of New Ulm, the Diocese of Winona, what's the 4th one?
There's 3.
There's just the 3, okay. I saw 4 there. So the point is that some progress has been made, but in northern Minnesota, and in 3 dioceses in particular, they still are way behind where they ever should have been. And it is this courageous survivor, this courageous family, and so many other courageous survivors who have stood up for the truth and themselves to protect other kids, to whom we are so grateful today, to you and to all those who have stood before you and on whose shoulders we stand today, in gratitude and hope that it will be safer, that it will be cleaner and more transparent. Thank you, Patty and Ron Vasek. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, man. Come here, Patty.
Jeff, do we have any idea how many victims are up in the red there, up in those 3 dioceses?
The question is do we have any idea how many survivors or victims there actually are that have yet to be revealed, and or offenders that we know have yet to be revealed in the Diocese of Crookston or the Diocese of Duluth and the Diocese of St. Cloud? And the answer is the numbers of offenders that have already been revealed number in the hundreds. The number of actual victims, thus, number in the thousands, and how many is impossible to know. And why is it so impossible to know? Because the truth around who the offenders are has been so hidden and concealed by the Catholic bishops for so long. The survivors always thought they were alone and suffered in silence, the same way Ron did in 1971, thinking they wouldn't be believed and they were the only ones. And until more recently, it's only that survivors have been given permission to know they can be believed and they're not alone. And as a result of that, we now have hundreds of offenders, never before disclosed, in the Diocese of Minnesota that now are beginning to be, and as a result, we just know that there are so many survivors still suffering in silence. Thousands, if not tens of thousands in numbers, and every time Ron Vasek stands up and shares his story, we know that others find the courage and the will and a way to know they can be believed. And every time an offender like Grundhaus, who had never before been publicly exposed, gets exposed as Ron had the courage to do, it gives permission of other survivors to share their story. And that's been your experience, isn't it, Ron?
I've had a number of people come up to me and tell me of their abuse, not just by priests, also by priests, but by Boy Scout leaders, by teachers, by parents, by brothers. It's not good. I mean, it's so disheartening to hear it, but yet I feel good that they have enough confidence and courage to come to me and tell me that it now they can feel that they can speak like I've been able to speak now after 42 years of silence. I finally was able to speak. Some of these people have been holding their abuse longer than that. The average time is 25 years from abuse to where somebody mentions it for the first time to anybody. I know of 2 people who are afraid to come forward within the diocese that were abused by a priest because of the treatment they're afraid they're going to get because they've seen what happened with other victims. And they see what's happening to me with the public scorn by the officials. And my request would be, if there's victims out there, why doesn't the diocese console the victims instead of re-victimizing victims? I've talked to many victims since my press conference in May that have told me the treatment that they got from the diocese after they revealed their abuse. And they were re-victimized all over again instead of being taken care of. I know of suicides that have been completed from victims of priests in our diocese. And the diocese has not reached out to the victims' families at all to help them deal with suicide of their loved ones from priest sexual abuse. I think that's appalling. We're supposed to be a church of mercy and love. And we don't see that right now, at least not currently and not in the past. I would hope that through this process that the diocese would realize that they need to quit re-victimizing victims and look to them and see how they can help them instead of how they can get around the issue by circumventing statutes and law. To me, that's what appalls me more than anything, is how they hide behind the law instead of helping the victims.
Ron, you mentioned public scorn of you by diocese officials since you first brought this suit and first went public with it. What public scorn by diocesan officials are you referring to? What have they or the bishop said or done to make you believe that you have been scorned by him or them?
On many occasions, they have refused to admit that anything happened. In statements made by the bishop, he said that it was lies, that he was a victim of the author of all lies, the devil, referring to me. There's a lot of other things that the bishop has put in the press and in his newspaper that are not true. The attitude that has come forth from the diocese towards us, towards my son, has been bad, to say the least. So there hasn't been one person from the diocese that has reached out to our family and asked us how they could help us.
From the bishop's office?
From the bishop's
From the
office.
bishop's office.
There have been a lot of priests that have been supportive.
Very, quite a number of priests that have been very supportive.
But the bishop's office and nobody from the bishop's office, from the bishop that has reached out to you pastorally.
Right.
No,
That's correct.
not one person.
Can we go back to this 10/21/15? Can you say a little bit more about that conversation? How did that conversation go down, and why sign something when you know it was completely false?
In October, the question is, on October 21 of 2015, you were called to the bishop's residence.
Correct.
And what happened that caused you to sign something that wasn't true?
The bishop told me at that time that they had a report from another diocese that Monsignor Granhouse couldn't perform ministry in that diocese because of the allegation that I made in that diocese about the abuse. He handed me the letter that he said was written by Monsignor Foltz, and he wanted me to sign it. He said, read this and sign it. And I read that letter, and I said, I can't sign that. I said, it's not true. I said, the abuse did happen. And I said, I can't sign that. And I said, what will happen if I don't? And the bishop told me, he said, if the scandal of Grunhaus gets out, he says, how could I ever ordain you? He said, who would want you, and where would I put you? And besides, he said, it'd be very difficult for your son. I'm sitting at this point, he's standing over me. I knew exactly the power the bishop had over a priest in the diocese.
Your son was then a priest, Craig, in the Diocese of Crookston.
Right.
Or under the control of the bishop.
Absolutely. And I knew exactly what would happen to my son if I didn't sign that. So I said, give it to me, I'll sign it. And I did.
Well,
And I knew all the time it was a lie, but I got to protect my son. Because I knew how much he loved where he was.
And have you been able to pursue your vocation as a deacon in the diocese?
I am fully qualified to be a deacon. I chose not to be ordained by this bishop because at that time, by canonical advice, I would never know if I was being ordained because I kept this silent, or if I was being ordained to remain silent. So I wasn't going to take an oath of obedience to a bishop that I couldn't trust and that I knew had one over on me. So I decided, okay, this is it. The way my wife and I were treated at the last meeting that we had with the bishop, we decided that that was it. We weren't going to be abused anymore. And I decided not to be ordained by this bishop.
Well, that's a decision of conscience, and we applaud you for that and the courage you've demonstrated today and in the past. Thank you again, Patty and Ron Vasek.